Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second social media session of ASNIC 2020. This session is all about how to optimize the use of Twitter. We have a fantastic set of speakers lined up for you. Welcome. This session is also being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. And we will share the link for that shortly, so you can also share that with your friends and other followers. Please remember to tag my ASNIC and the hashtag ASNIC 2020 in all your tweets. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we start our talks. Majority of the talks for ASNIC 2020 are going to be on September 25th and 26th. You can sign up and register for that on the ASNIC website, and the link is also shared on the ASNIC Twitter account. We also have cases with the ACEs every Wednesdays. That has we had one this week and one last week, and we will be having a few more of these going through October 7th. There is also a special research program in collaboration with NIH that is going to be streamed on September 24th, and there is a session for technologists on October 3rd. We would like to thank our sponsors, and couple of housekeeping for today's session. All attendees are muted by default. If you want to post any questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen so that we'll be able to see your questions. Panelists will either reply back to you via text, or we'll keep the questions after we're done with all the talks and we can discuss it at that point. And if there are any questions, please use the chat button. All right, so let's start with our first talk. Viet Le is our first speaker. He's a researcher and physician assistant in cardiology who studies mobile health technologies, cardiovascular genetics, and other factors that affect cardiovascular disease. Mr. Le joined the Intermountain Heart Institute Cardiovascular Research Group in 2012. He devotes a portion of his time to seeing patients in clinic and the rest of his time to research projects. He's currently the co-chair of ACC CVT PA committee, and he's the president-elect of Association of PAs in Cardiology and serves on their executive board. He's also on the editorial board of various ACC publications such as CardioSmart and ACC CVT Web. Most importantly, he's my fellow ASNIC social media ambassador, and he also helped us organize this social media track for ASNIC 2020. He's going to talk about Twitter vocabulary for the newbies. Viet, you can take over.
Okay, let me just hit the share button here and get going. Okay. Hi, welcome everybody. I get to introduce Twitter vocabulary for the newbie. Really, it's, you know, as you see here, deciphering the language. It's tough, and hopefully as we go through this, you'll have a chance to get a sense of why I thought that Twitter vocabulary was important, and perhaps we'll kind of start off together here. So why learn Twitter terms? I think first, it improves confidence in using Twitter. Other social media platforms here, you know, a blast from the past. Here's the Matrix, and as you see Neo kind of asking, hey, do you even know how to fly this thing? And she just takes a moment and downloads that information. If only it would be that simple, but it improves confidence. She says, oh, okay, let's go. Well, optimize your experience. Knowing terms can improve your fluency, both with the platform and just how to use it most optimally. Here you see a scene from Limitless, and you just bringing in that information as if it's osmosis, right? Diffusion gradient. And then lastly, engage. So as we learn, have confidence, bring that fluency, we can engage at a high level. I think those of us on, of course, you know, I'm speaking to a biased crew of social media gurus, but I think the wonderful part about Twitter and other social media platforms is the ability to engage virtually at conferences. Of course, you know, now we're all virtual, but also afterwards and during. So, you know, let me make a case here of why it's so important to learn vocabulary. So in medicine, we learned anatomy and physiology, but in order to do so, you actually had to learn the vocabulary first. So, you can't quite get to here unless you have the background in order to put the structure in. And I often think of it like a house. If you start buying expensive furniture before you even have the foundation set, good luck when a storm comes. All right, so an anatomy of the tweet. Hopefully this is familiar to some because I crafted it and before I tweeted it, I went ahead and of course captured a screen grab of it. So first, to compose a tweet, here you have this Twitter button that allows you to tweet, but you have to craft something first. You can say something as inane as hi, or in this case, I've written 200, up to 280 characters can be used. You can add in some videos here or pictures, and then you can tag people. If you tag folks, then you actually get them to see it. And then if they like it, they can also tweet or retweet it rather. You can use a hashtag. And I like to explain hashtags like a bulletin board. Say, if you happen to go by the certain hall in the ICU or the CCU, you might read that bulletin board. But the nice part of a wide world hashtag is that anybody can find themselves down that hall if they look up that specific term. And in this case, we're using ASNAC 2020 and CV Nuke. And so anyone that looks up those hashtags will be able to join in that conversation of any tweet that's been tagged onto that bulletin board. And I'll show you a little bit further into this presentation of what that looks like. And then you send the tweet. So you compose it, you tag some folks, you might add some pictures into there, put a hashtag, and it has a little bit more global reach. Otherwise, we might be kind of yelling into the big vacuum. Okay, so the physiology of a tweet. We've talked about the anatomy of how it's built, but what does it look like once you start doing things? Here, you can see what happens after I went ahead and hit the tweet button. It was 13 seconds after, so I was pretty quick in grabbing that screen. And you can see that my compatriots here are tagged, but also a bunch of other folks are tagged into those pictures. So it posts to your timeline. You happen to have this feed that goes into your home feed, and you'll see that down here as a little house, and it'll pop right on up. And those of folks that follow you and or follow the hashtag or that you've tagged, it'll pop up in their timeline. They can see the pictures there. I chose 4, and it shows them in miniature. However, if you were to tap on any of those or click, it pulls it up into whatever screen that you're using. So that's kind of nice. You can kind of see here, I've included one of the pictures from a tweet introducing this session. And then actually this is from last year from our social media gathering there. And then the tagged individuals, you can kind of see where that pops up and where you can access it later in this place called the notifications. And then lastly, you can comment on a tweet. Anybody can. Well, you can turn that off as well if you happen to have folks that troll you. And unfortunately, that's a Twitter vocabulary I didn't want to quite get into in this session. Then you can retweet. So these are things that you can do after a tweet has been posted. And then lastly, like it. So these are the multiple little functions down here. And I can imagine it's kind of like the tools that you would use in Twitter. Or I'm sorry, not Twitter, but in the operating room, rather. So what's a hashtag and what happens here? Well, if you clicked on your search button and you'd heard about this hashtag, ASNAC 2020, what's everyone talking about on Twitter about this ASNAC 2020 or CV Nuke? Well, you'd click on that little search button, and then up at the top there, you could type in whatever hashtag fits your fancy. And, often med Twitter, cardio Twitter is used, Carrot Squad is used. And once you place that in there, like I said, you find yourself in front of this bulletin board that others have used the same bulletin board or that hashtag. Well, once you get there, enjoy. And you can kind of see where that earlier tweet ended up. And of course, 2 hours later is when I searched in the hashtag and found where I had posted this. And of course, you will see others from our group in that hashtag. Okay, so what happens to a favorite? You know, earlier you saw down in the bottom, that's one of the things you can do on a tweet is to like it or favorite it. Just know that others can see what you favorite. The corollary is that you can see what they favorite. There's a couple of mishaps that have occurred, I guess, from celebrities and others that didn't quite realize that whatever they liked or favorited was now available for others to know what they were liking or favoriting. I'll let your imagination kind of go where it needs to. But find these in the like section of your home page. This is my home Twitter page, and I can go across any one of these and go to where I've liked something, and I can keep it in that section and go back to it. Notifications, you can find it down below in your home screen or any screen where this little bell is, and it'll pop up with all the things that you've liked. And then of course in your feed. So in the home feed area, if I scroll downwards on my home page, then I could find tweets that had been liked by others and or myself. And so you can see a few folks there that we are notified if we follow them. Okay, so advanced terms. I'm hoping not to make too much vocabulary here if you're new to all of this, but looking at the term ratioed, no one really wants to be ratioed unless you're asking a specific question that you would like some input on. But what that means is when the comments, the numerator, is higher than the likes of the denominator. And so in this case, you can kind of see it's a little upside down. There were 442 comments, 2 likes. And actually, I like Dr. Mandrola. I follow him a lot, I follow him. And this happened to be one of those that there was a lot of controversy that his post brought up. And so it potentially suggests you've sparked something generally negative. You know, Rograd or Dr. Jha also commonly opines on things. And honestly, I like these kind of posts because it really makes you think. It makes you step out of the box just a little bit. And in this case, of course, I had searched political activism and then ratio. I forgot to keep these in my bookmarks, and unfortunately I didn't cover that in this slide deck. So moving on to what I think, you know, putting it all together, how do you engage at a very high level once you've gotten this vocabulary and you've started to use the tools little by little? Well, I'll tell you, one of my favorite people to follow, he does such a wonderful job on tutorials, Doc Strom. Dr. Jordan Strom, whom you've probably seen in one of the prior sessions, he does a fantastic job on creating a tutorial. And what that means is that you will string several tweets together as one learning session, very much like a PowerPoint, really. And so these are the following tweets that go along with the initial, where here he is going through and teaching in multiple tweets. And actually, I love this part about Twitter is you can add in visuals and then add in links to original papers. And then finally, of course, you know, topping this off into the third. And these can get quite long, but they're wonderful. It's a nice way to interact with primary investigators, primary authors, senior authors on papers, etc. But the tutorial is a great way. If you have something to teach, by all means, broadcast that out. Polls. So this made me a little bit late to signing on. I'm not afraid to admit that. But a poll is, I think, is very useful as well. In this case, you know, it's a little self-serving. Are you as excited as I am for ASNAC 2020 and CV Nuke, steering your Tweetanic? I did not give anyone a chance to say no. But of course, there's the comment. So you can always share your thoughts with the rest of us through commentary, or you can vote also. Just know that once you vote, no one sees your vote, but they also cannot see the percentages or how the votes go across unless they vote themselves. So a great tactic and strategy to get folks involved and engaged. I really like Dr. Michelle Kittleson's polls. She'll end up with results, please. And so if you're uncomfortable in answering, then at least you can have access to what the poll looks like, what the voting is, and hit results, please. So make it easy for your audience to engage and feel comfortable. No one wants to feel embarrassed that they, maybe answered the wrong way or whatever, what have you. So let me end up that in summary, why learn Twitter vocabulary? Why use social media? Well, first of all, the language helps improve your confidence in using that platform, whatever platform it happens to be. In this case, we're using Twitter, but optimize your experience really either as a consumer of information and or one that provides and creates information. But knowing those terms can help your fluency and then in engaging with your colleagues in your community at a much higher level. The language that we use in anything is so important for learning the new skills, whether it's in medicine or using a social media platform in this case. And that's actually the end of my talk, and I appreciate it. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Patel.
Thank you so much, Viet. This was great. This was a great one-on-one on Twitter terms. I did not know the term ratio, so that's good to know. You always learn something new. Our next talk, and we're going to learn a lot about how to actually make Twitter polls and all of that in a talk that's coming up later this session. Our next talk is by Dr. Ritu Thaman. She is an assistant clinical professor of medicine at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. She's a fellow of the American College of Cardiology and American Society of Echocardiography. She's on the board of directors of American Society of Echocardiography. Her research focuses on cardiovascular disease in women, mitral valve prolapse, mitral annular disjunction, and innovative implementation tools for cardiovascular disease. She is the chair of the ASC Echo Journal Club, which is a fantastic journal club, and I've learned a lot through that. She's also the social media strategist for ASC and the social media editor for Circulation Outcomes Journal. She is going to give a talk titled Breaking Through the Twitter Clutter. You can take over, Dr. Thaman.
Thank you so much for that kind invitation and introduction. And Viet, that was an excellent presentation. So I am tasked with figuring out what to do with clutter. And in this time of COVID pandemic, when everything seems out of control, this may be one area where we could gather a little bit of control over our Twitter clutter. Starting with the view. You can choose whether you see your tweets as the latest as they show up or as the top tweets. And that's purely a preference thing. And I just have it here for all of you to see. So when I think of clutter, I like to think of organizing it in a stepwise fashion. And I suggest, number one, you can start to unfollow accounts. There is a power dynamic here that one has to be very careful of, but that's the first step. Secondly, you can organize with Twitter lists. And then thirdly, if you have tons of tweets, you can delete your own tweets based on topics maybe that you're not interested in. So the first way to start is to unfollow some inactive accounts. This is a site called Untweets, and it's a website, and you go there and it tells you all the people who have been inactive that you are following. And when I pulled up mine, I saw some of my favorite people, but they just don't follow, they just don't tweet. So the last one from Dr. Bono is March 19th and Sunil August 13th. You know, I'm still following them because I just still like them. But you can, I had 281 found, and I did unfollow several. Another two apps that I found, one is called Followers Analyzer, where you can again find who are these people that you're following, but they're not following you back. Of course, NIH director is not following me. Neither is Dr. Nilchi. She is a rock star scientist who's working on the COVID-19 vaccine out of University of Colorado, and I'm a fan of her, so I do want to follow her. But it does break up who's not following you, and you can decide. And another way is to use unfollow for Twitter app. This is where it says X marks the spot, and you just go down and unclick whoever you don't want to follow. Now, some people may say that I want to do the Marie Kondo method, which is, does this person I want to unfollow, do they spark joy or not? And there's actually a site, Timimi Unfollow, and this man has started this. You log in with Twitter, and when you log in, it says, it takes you to where you have all your options come up. And in my case, it started with somebody that I see, Severe, who I have known a very long time. So I will keep on following him. But it asks you this important question: do the tweets still spark joy or feel important to you? So in consideration, if you have a lot of things going on. The next thing I would recommend in order to organize your Twitter is to create lists. First, again, use a stepwise approach. One, think of what kind of lists you might be interested in, and I'll show you some of my lists for ideas also. Then you create your lists, and I'll show you. And then you go to the profiles and you add those profiles that you want in your list. So here's me, and this is where you go in your profile and you can see under your profile is this term lists. Okay, so how do I start this? These are my lists here. I've organized some by artists, Carrot Squad, CMR, modeling, scientists I like. So how do I go about creating a list? You can just go here and name your list. I'm just making one up, Twitter for cat lovers. And you can describe what it is so you remember. Hopefully you remember just by the name of the list, but you go ahead and make a description if you like. And then you can decide whether you want to make it private for just yourself to see, or do you want to share it with everyone else. Then what you can also do is, once you've done that, you can then add members to your list. So then you search here, and I went through and I searched and I found Viet. I added him to this list, and then I searched again and I looked for Nidhi and I added her to this list. And then that's all it takes. You add them and they're now in your list to follow. And then if you want, you can actually change your picture to represent whatever the list is depicting. So that's pretty straightforward as well. And I just wanted to show you how I did that. You can also go and then delete your off-topic tweets. Now, in my case, I have a lot of tweets, but I have not gone back, but I wanted to show you just the example. If you go into Twitter Advanced Search, I went there and I just typed in carrot from my account. I wanted to see, okay, maybe there's something in there that I want to get rid of. But in fact, I ended up liking a tweet of Martha's, and it came up and then got retweeted. So I didn't end up deleting anything, but that is the way you would if you wanted to search under a topic. And this was something that came up. Bobby Yee had posted this a while back. You know, if you have a tweet somehow or a discussion that gets out of hand, you know, how do you respond? And mine was, you know, I don't wash my dirty laundry in public. And so hopefully you don't either. And you don't have any angry tweets that you need to delete. Another way of organizing your Twitter is through your bookmarks. I don't know about you, but I have accumulated probably thousands of bookmarks since it was invented by Twitter in 2018. And this is a handy little app called Pocket. It's been around since 2007, so many of you may have already, you know, known about it and use it. It is $5 a month if you want to use it. The reason to pay the $5 is because that will allow you to search. So this is a tool that allows you to take anything that you bookmark and put it into a folder in Pocket and organize it, because many times you have bookmarks and you may not remember. So you go into your bookmarks, as I did here, and then you go here to share tweet via, and this Pocket comes up. And under your sharing, you save it to your Pocket. Then you go and you type in a tag that you want, and then that's saved. And that way, if you're doing a talk or you need to write a paper, you can go back and find that bookmark more easily. You can go back right in Twitter, but it's quite cumbersome. And especially if you have many tweets that are saved as you're in your bookmarks. So that is all I have. I suspect that there will be more questions in terms of clutter, and I'm happy to take them at the end presenting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Taman. That was a fantastic talk. It was a lot of new apps and tools, and I think all of us should kind of, you know, take a little bit of time and work to organize our Twitter feed a little bit better, and that can, you know, definitely improve our Twitter experience and, you know, what we get out of it. Our next talk is by Dr. Farris Timimi. He's an assistant professor of medicine at the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine and a consultant in the cardiovascular diseases at the Mayo Clinic. He serves as a medical director for Mayo Clinic Social Media Network and program director for the Advanced Heart Failure and Transplant Fellowship Program. He received his bachelor's and medical degrees from East Tennessee State University, completed his internship and residency in internal medicine at the Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. His fellowship of cardiovascular medicine and interventional cardiology were done at Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. His talk is titled "To Tweet or Not to Tweet." You can take over, Dr. Timimi.
Thank you. And thank you all of you for not only attending, but for your flexibility in this era of new innovation. So I really want to try to focus on the time we have together on a very particular issue that is one that I'm very passionate about. And it is the issue of risk. And frankly, my experience has been that the fear of transgressions in social media has had a stilling effect and precludes any innovation, experimentation. And it's critical that those of us who advocate for healthcare social media in the current era be very transparent in recognizing risk and talking about how to mitigate that risk. And so what I want to do is go over the three key elements that I think are critical for those of you who intend to advocate for social media in your enterprise to try to minimize that risk and do so in a very transparent fashion. And those three elements are effective and meaningful onboarding of new staff, meaningful healthcare social media training, and clear social media guidelines. And we'll spend some time on the latter because that is the most critical. They've got to be clear guidelines that your frontline staff can incorporate and clearly understand. The first is onboarding. And when I talk about onboarding, I'm talking about more than that moment that HR meets with the new hire. I'm talking about you thinking about your social media platform as a way of building cultural awareness and integration. And that integration begins before the employee is hired. You need to think about your corporate social media landing site as an element for recruitment in the current era. And it needs to be populated strategically with employee tips, information on the city you live in, on housing opportunities. This is our Mayo Clinic employee Facebook page, and it really serves as a way of us extending our culture to those who currently are not employed by Mayo Clinic, but thinking about working at Mayo Clinic. Same for our Mayo Clinic employees Twitter account. Now, I don't mean to belittle the role that HR plays, and during orientation, it is really important that someone meets with your new employee to go over your social media channels, to go over the guidelines and policies used for social media. And the overarching goal is for your employees to view your social media portfolio as a means for them to be a part of your brand advocacy. And in the current era, we do that more and more often through tools like YouTube and Zoom. In the era before COVID-19, we would meet with our new employees to go over these clearly vital strategic elements in a face-to-face fashion. Now, the second element I want to make sure we're clear about is the role of ongoing training. So once your employee is on staff, you need to have clear training that allows them to use these tools strategically. For us, there are two elements that make up that training. The first is social media residency, which is again, in the old era, and in the current era, it's on Zoom as this is, but the prior era was a face-to-face residency program, 1 day in duration, where a coworker or colleague arrives with a particular problem they need to solve using social media, and spend the day trying to craft a plan to include resource allocation and time commitment to address that and leave with a clearly defined plan. The second element we use is social media healthcare certification, which is offered asynchronously. Internally, it's free to our employees. We offer it externally as well for a fee. And it is an online training program that allows anyone in healthcare to complete CMA certified training in how to use social media strategically, covering everything from the different portfolio platforms we use, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, visual social media. More critically, professionalism as applied to social media, resource allocation. It takes about 4 hours to complete, can be done in an asynchronous and a non-sequential fashion, and provides 3.5 hours of CME credit for the employee. The second element that we use for ongoing training centers on our social media network. And it's one you're welcome to explore. I've included the link. It's free to have a basic account. It is best thought of as a sandbox for exploration, where where our employees and coworkers can network with colleagues around the world talking about social media challenges, opportunities. They can post potential problems and look at other solutions people have explored in their own enterprise. Now, the third element, which I think is the most critical element, are guidelines. And I need you to think about guidelines not as barriers for your colleagues, but other means of guiding them to effective utilization. And these guidelines have got to be clear, easily comprehended by frontline staff, easily understood by frontline staff, and actionable. And as an example, these are our guidelines in their entirety for social media for Mayo Clinic employees. They're available online. You're welcome to look at them as well. There are 1 page, 10 points. Each of them is informed by a blog post the employee can pursue at their own discretion. The key is that they are clear, concise, and easily comprehended. Some elements I think that are critical that you consider that are applicable to Twitter in particular. First of all, think about your profile. Think about your profile in a very strategic and clear fashion. Your profile is best thought of as your Twitter business card. Now, having said that, it's critical that you not include your corporate logo in your profile. It creates a misinterpretation. You speak on behalf of the enterprise. In addition, although you can see I've included a disclaimer, mine says these tweets are mine, not Mayo's. A disclaimer is not legal protection. And it doesn't allow me to engage in unprofessional behavior. It just indicates that I speak on my behalf, not that of my enterprise. Finally, you need to have your profile optimized. You need to think about what words you want to put in that profile. What image do you want to put in that profile? How can you populate your profile with keywords that optimize your search engine optimization, your SEO and SERP? Because it is prioritized by bot crawlers for both Bing and Google. Now, when you post, it's really critical that that you're very clear about who you are, that you post on your behalf, not that of your staff, not that of your enterprise. Always post in the first person. It avoids misrepresentation of who you represent. Although we don't see HIPAA transgressions that occur in social media platforms, always remember that HIPAA applies in all circumstances, and avoid anonymous accounts. One, no one's anonymous in the current era online. If someone wants to find out who you are, they can quite readily. And two, the misperception you're anonymous allows for unprofessional behavior. If you're challenged on social media, if someone on Twitter asks you a very particular question, let's say someone tweets to me and says, I have new onset heart failure, I've been placed on lisinopril, what should I do? I can answer in a very general sense. I could say, in general, I would get electrolytes after 2 weeks to look for any evidence of azotemia, but anything that's more medical should be transitioned to a secure portal exchange. We call this the Vegas rule. Unless it's in the cache, you cannot put it in the trash. So unless it's still in your computer cache, once it's posted online, the power of social media is the ability to share beyond geographic constraints, beyond time constraints. It's also the biggest risk. And any error you commit on a social platform can reflect poorly on you as an individual, on your enterprise, and on your profession. Before you post anything, think about 3 things. Who am I posting this to? Am I adding value to ongoing conversation? And is it appropriate for all ages? Think about language, think about culture, think about engagement. Before you begin exploring social media in general, this applies to Twitter as well. Review your enterprise's guidelines, define your opportunity and your goal. Now, the reason I stress that is these are very different tools. There's a different demographic penetration of Twitter versus Pinterest versus Facebook. Think about your audience, what you want them to understand, what you want them to do as a product of that engagement. Think about who you represent. Particularly for Facebook, know and review your privacy settings on a quarterly basis. After you start, you've got to be real. The ability for people online to tell when you're not who you really are is really quite clear. You've got to be respectful. You've got to spend some time lurking before you start to begin to explore, and you've got to have a listening strategy that's so critical. You know, just like a good marriage, you're judged more by how you listen than by what you say. You got to think about your Twitter profile as your real estate, as your geographic space. As your geographic space that represents your name. Focus on 3 things. How can you populate that space? How can you put content to occupy the space to represent who you are and what you want people to understand about you? Can you dedicate the resources to track that space? You don't have a Twitter account that you're actively tracking and have material that you need to respond to that you're not engaging with. And finally, who do you want to engage with? Who is that community of reference you want to engage with? Who's coming to explore your Twitter real estate? And finally, this is our social media guidelines that I think are easily tweetable. Don't lie, don't pry, don't cheat, you can't delete, don't steal, and don't reveal. I'm available on Twitter. That's my email address. That's where I blog. That's our corporate Facebook page. And I want to thank you again for your time, your patience, and your ability to acclimate and adjust to our new reality, which I think is something we're all struggling with in the current era. I'd be happy to take questions either now or at any point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Timimi. That was a great presentation. You know, very practical approach of how to use Twitter better, but what to kind of really look out for and not do, because as you said, you know, it's out in the open, and it really reflects on you and your professional brand. We'll keep the questions for the last. Our next speaker is Dr. Renee Bullock-Palmer. She is the Director of Non-Invasive Cardiac Imaging and Director of Women's Heart Center at the Deborah Heart and Lung Center in New Jersey. She serves on several committees and working groups in the American Society of Nuclear Cardiology, American Society of Echocardiography, SCCT, as well as the ACC and AHA. She's the chair of ASNIC's Social Media Task Force, as well as the chair of Clinical Solutions Program Track at ASNIC 2020. She's speaking on a really timely topic today, and she's gonna teach us all about how to maximize our conference presence using social media. Over to you, Renee.
Thank you, Krishna. I'm so happy and I'm very thankful to the Social Media Track Chair, Niti Agarwal, for inviting me to give this very exciting topic today on maximizing your conference presence using social media. I have no disclosures. So the outline of this talk, I'll be going through the impact of social media at medical meetings, creating your brand, planning your meeting and setting your social media roadmap, creating your best tweet, keeping it professional, and then we'll put it all together. So the reach, the global social media is quite impressive with regards to the global reach. Just last month's meeting at the European Society of Cardiology Congress, they had over 295 million impressions. And as you know, that meeting is, I believe, the largest meeting in cardiology, and the reach was quite global, even as far as the Netherlands, and it was quite impressive. And bringing it home to the US, the SCCT meeting as well in the summer, they had their prevention meeting in July. And again, they also had quite a large reach, 3.6 million impressions. Bringing it home to ASNAC, just last year, we launched our first social media track, and we had our first social media ambassador. My partner in crime with that was Niti Agarwal, Dr. Agarwal, and it was quite impressive. Just that one year, last year, we had close to 10 million impressions. You know, we had several social media ambassadors, and we're very happy that that program was successful. For SCCT.
Hi, Renee.
Yeah, hello. Yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We cannot see your screen, so I just wanted to interrupt you briefly to make sure that you can share your screen.
Let me make sure. I'm sorry. Should I start from the beginning then? I probably should.
Yes.
Okay.
That would be great. Thank
How
you.
about that? All right. Let me just go back to the previous slide. Right. So as I was saying, with the global reach of the ESC Congress in September was quite impressive. As I mentioned, over 200 million impressions, and the SCCT meeting. And as I had mentioned earlier, with ASNAC 2019 last year, we had close to 10 million impressions with the launch of our first social media track program. And as is shown here, and just in SCCT's meeting last month, in July, their reach was quite impressive as well. They had several social media ambassadors, and was quite, very impressive in that they also had several awards given to social media ambassadors that had the most prolific tweets and very active Twitter activity. Now, with regards to the ACC national meeting just last year, the ACC imaging section, we also have quite a lot of activity there. Many of us, some who are on this list of panelists, were actually quite influential in tweeting at the meeting last year. And as you can see, the impact is quite national, and we have quite a large network of ambassadors and also influencers in the field. So far for meeting this year, we have quite a lot of activity. Just in the past week and a half, we have had close to 3.6 million impressions so far, and we still have another 2 weeks to go. So quite exciting so far at this meeting. And we're very happy to announce that this year's meeting as well, we'll be giving 3 awards for the most engaging scientific tweet and the most prolific tweeter. And that will be a free registration for next year's meeting. So hopefully after this talk, I will, influence you guys to actually tweet away and really, engage with our colleagues. So this was a poll that I did last year at ASNAC 2019, and just wanted to see what others thought with regards to the impact that social media had on their professional meeting experience. And most of the respondents, the persons who responded, actually thought that social media was actually improved their education experience at medical meetings, also increased networking, meeting other colleagues. Many colleagues, some who are even on this list of panelists, I've met through social media. It's really an opportunity to engage not only with your colleagues, but also leaders in your field as well. It fosters collaboration, just through collaborating with several colleagues on social media. You can even start research projects, write a paper, and in some regard, it even may provide for job opportunities, as was mentioned in the last talk. Many institutions are actually, posting when they have, job opportunities. So it may also lead to that opportunity as well. So, just before, of course, before tweeting away, it's very important, as, Ritu had mentioned, that you have to, create your brand, be true to your professional interest, always keep it professional, being authentic as well, highlighting your academic achievements and also supporting the achievements of your other colleagues, sharing your advocacy and outreach efforts as well, and of course, avoiding negative behaviors. Just some important handles, especially to include in your tweets, especially for a cardiac imaging standpoint. You have the HCSM, you have SNMI, of course, ASNAC, ASC, SCCT, HA, and also ACC and ESC. So, don't forget that when you share your tweets, it's very important to include these handles, as this will also help to populate the tweet and to have more of a global reach as well. So, of course, at this year's meeting, because it's not an in-person meeting, we do have an interactive program planner. So, if you're planning on attending the meeting virtually and really having some presence at the meeting, the first thing you have to do is to download the interactive program planner. You really want to know what's happening at the meeting, which talks you'd like to attend, which talks you'd like to promote. If you're actually speaking at one of these sessions, you might also want to share that on social media as well. Of course, for in-person meetings, as with ASNAC last year, there's an app that you can actually download to your phone, and it could be very helpful in organizing and planning your meeting. So with regards to the planning of the meeting, the virtual platform, in my opinion, I think makes it much easier to attend, as you're no longer having any borders globally in terms of hopping on a flight, booking a hotel room. So it's much easier to engage, on social media with a virtual platform. You want to select the tracks of your interest or your expertise, and that you'll be attending. It's also important to share when these talks will be happening, to share this on social media as well. Tagging the speaker at the session is important, and also other experts in that particular field or interest that will be discussed. Also tagging the professional society and important hashtags, as Viet had mentioned, with ASNAC 2020, CV Nuke, and so on. And sharing your tweets during the session is also helpful, because then you'll engage in discussion during the session. After the session is also very helpful as well, because then you may also generate further discussions that lead into other talks or sessions at the meeting. Now, important persons to tag in your tweet: the president of the society for this year, that's Dr. Dorbala, for ASNAC, SCCT, ESC, CMR, and the other societies. Tagging experts within the field as well. Tagging your institution is also helpful as well. And of course, make sure to keep your tweets professional with that. And using the society hashtags. For ASNAC, as you know, it's CV Nuke. For CT, SCCT, it's YesCT. SCMR, it's YCMR. And then, of course, ASC is Echo First. So this was an article that was published by Dr. Pawani and Jack last year on the use of social media relevant to cardiology, tips for increasing engagement, use of popular hashtags relevant to cardiology, both from an individual and an organizational perspective, suggestions on setting limits on your time on social media, because as you know, we also have to balance our clinical time as well, and other other obligations. Identifying a focus on social media as well, that's a part of creating a brand. Being civil, remaining professional, and as was mentioned in the previous talks, always being cautious of with regards to patient information and HIPAA. Even be mindful that even if you do not include the patient's demographic data, if their clinical presentation is unique and that patient can track that discussion is about me, or that can be a conflict. So generally speaking, I tend to stay away from discussing any patient relevant information on social media. So examples of great tweets. So, you want to have, if you do include images, to have good quality images of your slides, because, if the you know, if the person's on social media cannot see what's in the slide, then, you know, what's the purpose? So I find that Office Lens is very helpful to really have the slides pop, especially when you're posting it online. And of course, not only just posting the slides, but also having 3 or 4 key messages from the talk. And usually most of the talks will have a summary slide. So just, you know, reviewing that and posting that in your tweet as well. As I mentioned before, the societal hashtags and handles. If there's a paper that was referenced in the talk, you might want to use bit.ly to reference that paper in the talk, including the hashtags as well, and engaging members. Now, you can also post a video on Twitter, but you want to make sure that you keep it really short. I would generally suggest less than a minute. And so probably the last part of the talk where the speaker is summarizing the top 4 points or whatever of the meat of the talk, you might want to post that video, but generally speaking, try to keep the videos very short. So important things, you have to, you know, if you really want to engage at any societal meeting, you really have to follow the social media ambassadors. This is just a tweet from last year's ASNAT meeting, and of course this year's meeting, just to really engage and see what's going on. And then you can also retweet and comment on their tweets and then generate further discussion on that. Introducing a schedule of the talks. This is just an example by Dr. Esha Hardy that when he actually posted this back in September, referencing today's talk and the timing of the talk. Also, Viet did the same thing too. So that's very important, so that, you know, those who are following you can make sure that they attend and read or follow up on your, you know, discussion on Twitter after the talk. Examples of good tweets. These are just examples of previous sessions, one by Dr. Agarwal at ESC Congress. She actually had, you know, posted, you know, 5 very important points, very nice slides attached to the tweet, and also having important hashtags as well. Same thing by Dr. Cater on a talk and doing the same thing with the 4 bullet points. So you really want to make sure that you reference those summary points in the tweet. This is also an example from ESC Congress with regards to the Voyager trial, PAD trial that was presented. This was at ACC, actually not ESC, ACC back in March. That was a virtual meeting. This is one by Dr. Abu Izzuddin from last year's ASNAT meeting on imaging for cardiac amyloid. Just very important points. And of course, he, you know, tagged a lot of the experts in that field, the Mayo Clinic, where that's his institution, the societal hashtags, and also for both heart failure and for ASNAT. Polls I find are very helpful as well, you know, especially leading into a session that you might be attending or speaking at. You know, it might be very interesting to engage on social media through a poll what your colleagues might think of a particular type of practice or particular imaging modality, etc. So this was one that was posted by Dr. Gibson. This was from ESC Congress, where he, you know, set out a poll on the use of colchicine, what others thought. So that's also very useful. This was one from last year's meeting. This was before our debate session on preventive cardiology last year, where we actually generated some discussion on what others thought on several choices with regards to the case that was presented. This was one that I did just last week on just what people thought of the impact of COVID-19 with virtual meeting platform. Is it easier to engage with others on social media? Most of the respondents thought that yes, it did. So, you know, I find that polls can be very helpful. It's very easy to set up a poll on Twitter, but you want to make sure to make it very short. I would not have more than 4 choices, and if you're going to have questions, I would keep it to 3 questions or less in the poll. After the meeting, very important to, you know, give 5 important bullet points on what were the important topics or things that you learned at the meeting. This is just an example of that from ESC Congress by Dr. Stefan Achenbach on the 4 important points that he, you know, got from the meeting that had taken place. This was one by Dr. Agarwal from last year's meeting on top points. This was actually from one of the debates that they had at last year's meeting as well. So just in summary, steering your Tweetanic and establishing your presence. So plan ahead of the meeting, download the app or the interactive planner, follow the influencers and experts in the field, as well as the Society's social media ambassadors for the meeting. Post schedule of your talks that you'll be attending or moderating or speaking at to encourage attendees to follow your tweets from the session. Keep the tweets informative and professional. You really don't want to just have selfies at the meetings. You really want to have always try to have even 2 or 3 informative points that colleagues can learn from what you're posting online. Including pictures or videos or links to important references can make it more interesting and more meaningful. Including, very important to include the societal hashtags and handles as well as in your tweet. Including polls as well is helpful, and at the end of the meeting to post your 3 important teaching points from the talks or from the meeting itself, and then ensure that you're remaining engaged with colleagues, not just at the meeting but even after the meeting, 1 or 2 weeks after the meeting, because you'd be surprised how much discussion might be generated after the meeting going forward. In the current COVID-19 era, many meetings have gone virtual. Some registrations have even been complimentary, as was the ESC, which breaks down a lot of geographic and cost barriers. And this might be an opportunity for many who have been on the fence with regards to social media to jump in and really, learn from the experience and grow with it. Many, like myself, when I started social media, it's a little bit tepid with regards to going in, but as you engage more, you find that it's more meaningful. And I hope this talk was helpful. Thank you very much for your attention.
That was a fantastic talk. Again, social media, especially Twitter, can be a really, really good tool, not only to learn, but also to network and engage with everybody during conferences. It has made all speakers really very accessible. And also, you can use it to generate discussion. It was a great talk. Our last talk is by Dr. Parham Eshtehardy. He is a preventive and imaging cardiologist at Northside Heart and Vascular Institute in Atlanta, Georgia. He has a clinical and a research interest in coronary microvascular dysfunction and coronary imaging. He is an associate editor for European Heart Journal Case Reports and the social media editor for Open Heart BMJ. He's a fellow of the American Heart Association and has served on several leadership committees on the ACC, AHA, ASNC, and SCCT. He's a current member of ASNC Image Guide Registry Research and Publications Committee and ACC and AHA Cardiovascular Imaging Section Leadership Councils. His session is really practical. Now that we've learned everything that we can use Twitter for over the last 2 sessions, we're going to put it into practice. His talk is titled Going Live, Tweet Tutorials and Twitter Polls. Over to you, Parham.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this great session. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay, great. So yeah, you've heard about all the good things that you can do with Twitter about patient care, attending conferences, educating people, learning, all the good things. And now my job is to help you to go live, how to tweet, how to create tutorials, and how to create Twitter polls. These are my disclosures. Okay, let's talk about tweeting. You heard about a lot from all of my colleagues this week and last week. And I hope that by now we have convinced you to join Twitter, have a handle, and already logged into Twitter and ready to tweet. So this is a structure of a simple tweet. Basically, your tweet has text, which is up to 280 characters. It has hashtags, which make your tweet searchable. As you heard from my colleagues, you can tag people in the text. You can have links. You can tag people. You can tag journals, organization. Anyone with the Twitter handle can be tagged in your Twitter. And then you can add links. You can have up to 4 photos. or one video. And interestingly, you can tag people in the photos, up to 10 people, and save some space in your tweet by tagging the people in your photo instead of tagging them in your text. And now as a new option, you can also determine who can reply to your tweet. So this is basically how you put a tweet together. And as my colleagues showed you, you just click on tweet and boom, you're online. So now you know how to tweet. Let's talk about tutorials. Tutorials are becoming more and more important in the medical Twitter, education, cardio Twitter atmosphere, to the point that now there is a place for a collection of medical education tutorials. They have up to 2,000 tutorials and they update them all the time. It's a great place, first of all, to read those tutorials and learn, and also a great place to see good examples of tutorials. So you can go there and look at what they have and use them as an example. So what is a tutorial? Twitter tutorials or tutorials are a series of tweets commonly presented as a thread aiming to educate audience on a specific topic. Most people consider them as mini lectures. They can be posted by leaders and experts to educate peers and public, by students and trainees to educate peers, by journals and authors to explore publications, or you simply decide to teach people how to create a tutorial. And this is how this tutorial was created, to teach people to create tutorials. Okay, let's see how we can create tutorials. First, you need to identify a subject or publication or whatever you like to explore and teach. You have to identify your audience. Peers, trainees, public. It's important to know who your audiences are so you can basically create your tutorial based on their understanding. You start a thread, which is a series of connected tweets. You have to number your tweets so people can follow in your thread. Number one, number two, you can combine text and images and tables. I strongly recommend that you include an image in every single tweet in a tutorial. You can lose links to your sources, publications, and cite your work. Let the people know what you've done in that field. Use bullet points, that's very important. And again, number your tweets. Okay, so this is an example of a tutorial that me and Andrew Choi made for cardiac CT evaluation of coronary plaque. On the left side, this is our introductory tweet. We numbered it 1 out of 14. We have bullet points. We tell the people what to expect from the tutorial. We have hashtags. We have organizations and journals tagged in our tweet. And then we have this image of kind of the introductory for our tutorial to make it eye-catching as possible. And you can see in the middle, this is our number 2, so you can see it goes like a thread. And again, we start talking about the role of cardiac CT. We have bullet points, and then on the right side you can see our third tweet, which is start talking about a paper, and then we tag the authors. We have a link to the paper, and we have a graph from the paper. Okay, so you know how to make tutorials. How to create successful tutorials. When you make a tutorial, you want that tutorial to be read by many people and to be educational. So it's important to make it successful. First, you need to clearly state your purpose and issue in the introductory tweet. And your introductory tweet needs to be eye-catching. You need to have important question. You have to have a nice image. So people who are basically surfing their Twitter see your tutorial and then start reading it. You need to use appropriate hashtags. You heard about the importance of hashtags. Hashtags make your tweets searchable. So if you write something about cardiac CT and you put a hashtag for cardiac CT, which is yes CT, then everyone who's interested to learn and know about cardiac CT can search those hashtags and they will see your tutorial and will read it. Include an image in each tweet. That's very important. Tag appropriate people, both in the text and images. You can tag the people, peers, expert. That's important for them, so so they come and read your tutorial. Keep your text short. You can put some of your text in your image or make a slides as we did, but keep your text short. Consider including polls. In fact, your introductory tweet can be a poll, and it's a good way to collect attention. You can use URL shortener website to make it nicer, and then definitely keep your tweets limited to 10 to 15 tweets in your tutorial. This is again another tweet from that cardiac CT plaque assessment tutorial. As you see here, this is our takeaway tweet. We have bullet points. We made final basically summary, and then we have this slide of a take-home message, which is great because this take-home message slides can be, there's our images, they can be saved on the phone or a computer and people can use them later if you make those a slide. And then also you save some space from your tweet and put some of the text in the slide. And then you can do creative work. We posted this tutorial right before SCCT 2019. So in our last tweet, we linked to a session on plaque assessment during the conference and tagged the conference and journal and the new publication in the journal on cardiac CT. So these are the creative work you can do to, again, gather more attention for your tutorial. Just emphasizing on the importance of tagging experts and peers and tagging them in your photos. Remember that you can tag up to 10 people in your photos. And if your tutorial includes 10 tweets, then if you tag 10 people in each tweet, then you end up tagging 100 people. So many people will look at your tweet, they retweet and then read them. Here, this is a good example of a publication being in a tutorial. So Jordy here decided to write a tutorial and teach us about his new publication, which was published last week on aortic regurgitation, pressure, half-life, and its relationship with mortality. On the left side, this is his introductory tweets, very nice tutorial. And he did a very nice work because his first image in the tweet is a kind of a poster presentation, which is a summary of his entire paper. So it's a great way to do it. And then on the second one, he starts talking about the background. Again, you see you have a link to the paper, and then you have an image of the graph from that paper. This is, again, another example of a successful and great tutorial by a great educator. As you see here, this is a very eye-catching question. Why can furosemide improve dyspnea pulmonary edema from acute congestive heart failure within minutes of administration? You have an eye-catching vial of furosemide. And then number two, he starts talking about the background, different mechanisms. And then on the right side, you can see his summary and last tweet, which is summarizing all the discussions and the different mechanisms of furosemide causing improvement in pulmonary edema. And again, if you go to that that handle, Twitter handle, Med Tutorials, you can see lots and lots of great examples. And some of these people, like this educator, are famous on Twitter for posting great tutorials, and you can definitely learn from them. Okay, let's talk about Twitter polls. You heard about the importance of Twitter polls and how to use them. They basically allow you to pose a question on Twitter and ask other people's opinion. You can ask clinical questions from experts and peers. This was an interesting case and challenging case that we discussed during our M&M. The management was challenging and people had different ideas. So I posted this on Twitter and asked about the peers and experts' opinion. So about 240 people answered, and not only they answered the poll, they also posted their opinions as a comment. So these are a couple of experts who posted their opinions, and this is great and helpful when you have a challenging clinical case. You can ask about the practice trends here. I decided to ask my colleagues about their institutional use of echo-strain imaging. You can ask public opinion. Michael Gibson here decided to ask people about how they would get the COVID-19 vaccine. And as we discussed, you can have a poll as your introductory tweet for tutorial. That's a great way. You can have a poll posted, give people some time to answer, and then have your thread started and have your number 2 to 10 tutorial tweets regarding that. And that's a great way to collect attention. You can even ask people help for your ASNIC 2020 social media talk. Dr. Agarwal asked this question by posting a poll last week, and he presented the results during his talk. Okay, hope you know by now how to tweet, how to create a good tutorial, and how to create a Twitter poll. Let's do it together. It was supposed to be a kind of hands-on session. So open a tweet, click on the Twitter poll tab, and then pose your question. Write whatever you like. You can have up to 4 choices, and you can also determine the poll length, which could be from a couple of hours to up to 7 days. And then you can post it. You can put hashtags, you can do links, you can tag people in the text, or you can tag people in the comments or a second tweet as a response to your tweet for people to go and see it. Okay, what I want you to do now, this is my last slide. I want you to show us that you learn how to create a tutorial and a Twitter poll. Let's put together a tutorial and tell people how to create a successful tutorial, and also tell them what you learned from this ASNIC 2020 social media session today. And don't forget to include a photo, tag people, and let them see it. Also, I want you to create a Twitter poll and ask people what was their favorite SoMe session. We had one last week, one we have, and this is our second one today, and I'm hopeful that everyone picks today's session, although, you know, last week was great too. Okay, thank you for your attention. I hope you learned something from this talk, and I'm really looking forward to an in-person ASNIC 2021 next year.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashtay Hardy. This was fantastic. I am in the middle of building my Twitter poll, but we can wait for that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. The session is now open for questions. Please text your questions to us either in the chat window or in the Q&A window, and we can answer them. Just one last thing I wanted to share with everyone. Our third social media session of ASNIC 2020 is really, you know, using all the tools that we learned in the first 2 sessions and implementing it and using Twitter to discuss the ischemia trial. That's going to be on September 26th at 4 p.m. So please join us. I will start the Q&A session with a question that we received. So just a question for all panelists. You know, this is a question we get over and over again. Twitter is such a great tool to learn and to network and to engage with other members of the community and with our patients, but where would you put professional social media in your list of priorities amongst, you know, clinical duties, research, studying, kids? I mean, there's so many things that we're doing these days. How do you prioritize social media with everything else?
Hi, Krishna. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I usually, towards the end of the day, after the work day, because during, at work it's really difficult to engage, but I know, choosing one particular time for no more than an hour, or even 30 minutes every other day, sometimes if there's something that's really engaging, then I may, answer at the point of time. But I think setting limits is important. Thanks.
Well, I think you need to clarify two issues. One is cognizance, one is competence. So I don't think it's an operational goal that all healthcare providers be competent in using social media. I think they need to be cognizant of it as a tool that's available to them in their portfolio. But competency is different. I think the question that you need to ask is, what operationally do you need to accomplish, and can social media facilitate that? Is it focusing on education? Is it research? Is it clinical practice? Is it demand generation? Is it online personal identity? And if you can't articulate the operational goal that you're going to use social media to try to address, then I think dedicating time to it just because it exists doesn't accomplish anything. But again, having said that, I think you need to understand what's happening in the world today. You need to understand that people are dedicating a lot of time to this, to make decisions based on information they encounter. It becomes their news resource. So whether you choose to explore it or not is immaterial. People will. And the second thing is, whether you choose to explore your online identity or not is immaterial, because you have one, whether you've populated it or not. So if you don't think about how to build that online identity and how that represents you, I think you do yourself a disservice.
I think also those are excellent points. I think that when I'm on Twitter, I use it for multiple reasons, and I try to have them overlap. So if I'm doing Twitter, I'm using it also for research, and I'm doing it also because I will better my clinical outcomes because I'm going to educate myself. And I'm also saving in my bookmarks or elsewhere those articles and those discussions that are really valid and adding information beyond from just what my understanding of the literature or me just reading the article would be. And then you can go back. So if you have to write a paper, you have to give a talk, or somebody asks you a question, you have used that time wisely and can go back and reference it. So I think it is a very important part of your day, but allocate your resources and use them for more than one thing.
That's such a great point.
Yeah,
So the next question, the next question we have, sorry about that. Do you want to chime in? I saw you responded already.
Yeah. I responded to that question in the chat, and after hearing these responses, I'm probably closer to how Dr. Thalman approaches Twitter. Is kind of like an everything for me. And one of the things that is probably a little distracting at times, but my notifications on my home screen is where I will occasionally watch things as they go through, and things that catch my eye in lipidology or imaging, etc. I often will like, and then go back to it in my likes, and then move them to bookmarks later on. But it's a way for me to research and keep abreast of things.
That's great. Parham, did you have anything to add?
No, I think Dr. Palmer asking if we can ultimately offer CMEs for tutorials. That's I never thought about it. That's a great question. Now we have CMEs for reviewing for journals, for reading the journal. Journal clubs. American Society of Echocardiography is now offering CME for their Twitter journal club. So I think that seems to be realistic to me, and at some point we should be thinking about it. Yeah, I think this is a great point.
No, definitely. And tutorials per se, another good way to think about it is whenever we give any talk or prepare a presentation, it's always good to try to see if we can convert it into a tutorial to increase the reach of the work that we put into it. And we're giving the same amount of time to make a tutorial versus preparing for a talk at a conference per se. So it makes sense. That was a great idea. Another question that comes up is, Twitter is not, we talk about Twitter a lot because that's where most of our community is, and it's easier to network and learn on Twitter, but there's so many other social media platforms these days. So I wanted to ask you, how do you use other social media or like professional platforms such as LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram? Do you use it or at all? Or if you use it, do you use it to reach a different audience? What do you think about that?
So these are profoundly different tools with different demographic penetration, different use cases. Even the tail of content varies markedly. And so you need to have a clear strategy for whom you want to engage with and what you want them to know or how you want them to act to pick the correct tool. For me personally, any platform that has over 10 million participants, I want to have some engagement in, to at least be aware of what's happening in the community. But my time dedication will vary depending on whom I want to interact with and what I want them to do as a product of that interaction, what I want my audience to know.
No, I think this is a great point, and this is exactly why we have different platforms, because they have a different goals, and there are also for different people. And the problem with being on all these platforms is that it's gonna absorb a lot of time, because you're gonna spend a little time on Twitter, a little time on Instagram, a little time on Facebook. It's just, for me, it's not doable. For me, I have kept my social media presence professionally purely on Twitter. Of course, I have a Doximity profile, which I think it's the most important thing for all clinicians to have a Doximity profile. I personally do not have LinkedIn because I felt that this is a kind of a general, and I don't have time to spend there. So I have my professional profile on Doximity, and then my social media really to be engaged is Twitter. And I have to tell you that I joined Twitter about 2 years ago. And before that, I had no idea what Twitter was. And I felt that, this is just waste of time. And when I joined, I felt that this is a life-changing, event for me, because now I get most of what I need clinically, research and networking, all from Twitter. It's an unbelievable resource for clinicians, researchers, trainees, and it keeps you updated. I don't read any journals directly anymore, because I'm following certain number of people who have the similar interest as me on Twitter. And then I don't need to go to individual websites for the journals, because I'm 100% sure that if anything is published in any journals, which is in the same interest that I have with the other people, it's going to be posted, it's going to be retweeted, so I'm not going to miss anything important. They teach me by posting tutorials, they teach me by posting clinical cases. I can reach the people that I would have never thought to be able to reach. This is just a virtual networking. As a fellow, I had a question and I posted it and directly asked that question from the previous president of American Society of Echocardiography. How could you reach those people? You can't, people get 200, 300 emails every day. People don't read their emails. You don't see them during conferences. And now with the virtual meetings, I think it's a great platform.
Yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, I second that too, Parham. I think I joined Twitter about 3 years ago, and it has made attending medical meetings almost night and day. Actually, I mean, you know, you go to a meeting and it's almost, of course, you're going there for an educational experience, but there's such a great social and collaborative aspect to the meeting with social media. I remember seeing Viet for the first time live, I think at ASNAC 2018, after following him on social media. So, and I agree. I mean, the journals, the articles, you know, most of us were in imaging. You know, Ritu, I follow your tutorials at ASC, ASNAC, and you really get the information that you need or it's in your interest through Twitter. You know, you get the link to the article, and I think it's really an impressive tool.
That's great. So we're gonna just close with one last question that we have from one of our attendees. I mean, this comes up quite often. How do you deal with sometimes the wrong tone possibly being conveyed through your tweets? You know, even though you may not have meant it to be aggressive, that's something that we discuss quite often online or even offline, because you know, it's just a tweet. They can see you, they can, you know, see you talk or convey your point across. So how do you feel that we should approach this?
In my presentation, I was going to share one of Dr. Jha's moments where I thought that a tweet was really interpreted way off the mark, but apparently it was interpreted that way by a lot of people. And so we talk about ratioed, and oh boy, there was almost no likes and a whole bunch of comments. And you know, he's got a thick skin. I mean, I think it happens often enough because he uses Twitter to opine on things. It happens in person, though. Even when you see the person, you get the facial context or the body language. Misinterpretation occurs. So I think that should not be a fear for working on Twitter. But when it does occur, I've not had it happen often, but when it does occur and I see a comment occur on a tweet, I DM that individual if I can immediately and say, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how the interpretation went this way. What you know, would you like to converse about it? And just know that you know, that airing of dirty laundry or the thing that you were talking about, Ritu, DMs can be screenshot and sent out. So be careful too when you DM someone, direct message for those that don't know. Those can be screenshot, and so be nice, be kind, and seek to understand. And I think that's really the point of all of this, is seeking to understand. If you're coming on as a you know, bully pulpit, well, cardio Twitter comes on strong on those people. But if you're misunderstood, then seek to understand and be understood.
I think that's a profoundly beautiful way of expressing it. I really do. I would only add to that, avoid capital letters at all costs. Mm-hmm. Incorporate no more than 2 hashtags per tweet. More than that becomes very demonstrative. Speak in the first person whenever feasible. And then you should type your tweet in a fashion that you would use to converse. So if it comes across as a narrative conversation in the first person, it's unlikely to cross that line into misperceived transgression.
Great points.
Yeah, I mean, perception is reality. Certainly on Twitter, we have all learned that very well. And when something is perhaps misunderstood, understand, take a step back and imagine that person has good intentions. Sometimes they can be lost right. in the language that's chosen. But in fact, almost all of those times that has happened to me, I'm able to then really explain further, but always keep the positive part in mind. The person is not after you. There may be something in the language that sets something off in them that has nothing to do with you. So always keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think I second that, too. I haven't had any direct experience, but I've seen discussions online where a patient or someone in the public may engage a group of physicians as having a conversation, and sometimes when we're medically speaking, things get lost in translation. And I've seen where the discussion went well on Twitter. They actually enlightened the person and directed them to several resources online. So we have to be mindful of that, that sometimes, although we may not see a person like or retweet your tweet, they're still seeing your tweet. So we have to be very careful about that.
That's great. Those are all great points. We're hitting the 5:30 mark, so we're going to close this session. Again, I really want to thank all my speakers. You know, this was a fantastic session, even the last session as well. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your knowledge with all of us. And thank you to the attendees for coming and attending this session. We're going to take off. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank
Thank you, Krishna.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.